The Five Nights at Freddy's 2 movie has finally released, and I had the opportunity to see it on the 4th of December because it came early in my country. And let me tell you, it was an experience to say the least. I wasn't expecting to make a video on this movie, and I said I would only do it if there was enough to talk about, since I don't want to make one of those low effort movie reviews being like, yep, the movie is bad, give me some money. However, after watching this movie, there is so much to talk about, and I cannot get this movie off my mind. And it will forever be one of the most memorable cinema moments for me, since within 0.5 seconds of the movie starting, my bladder decided it was going to fill up like a Freddy Faz Cola, and I spent the next 1 hour and 40-minute runtime of this movie making sure I didn't piss my f***ing pants. And despite all that, I was extremely invested in the movie. So in this video, I'll be going back to my roots and doing an actual movie review. This will feature both a spoiler-free and a spoiler-included section, which both will be timestamped down below. But without further ado, don't forget to like, share the video around, and subscribe to help us hit 100,000 subscribers by the end of the year. And let's talk about the Five Nights at Freddy's 2 movie. So before I talk about the second movie and what's going on, I first want to talk about the first movie since I didn't end up reviewing that movie. My thoughts on that movie were pretty okay. I thought that the FNAF movie was an incredible cinema movie, and as a FNAF fan, I was super invested into the story. However, the first movie definitely left a lot to be desired, mainly the fact that it was PG-13 and refused to show any actual kills on screen. This made the movie not that scary and more funny because of all the cutaways before someone dies. The story is also just very difficult for a normal viewer to get into, and it didn't really pick up at all and make sense until the final 15 minutes of the movie. However, there were still a lot of really good moments, and overall, that movie was really well done and very enjoyable. But how does the second movie fare in comparison? Well, before I get into the review itself, let's discuss a couple of notes that I noticed before going into the theatre. Firstly, the movie is rated PG-13, like the original, and is actually a bit shorter than the first movie, at 1 hour and 44 minutes compared to the first movie's 1 hour and 50-minute runtime. Which I will say, I did go into the movie a little bit worried with that, but honestly, with all that, it's time to get into the actual review. Again, everything is timestamped, so let's start with the spoiler-free review. So for starters, like I said, the spoiler-free review. I actually wrote this after the main spoiler review so I could get my thoughts as clear as possible, since there's a lot to talk about. For starters, I think that the beginning 5 minutes or the prologue of this movie is absolutely incredible. Basically, this is the same thing as the night guard escaping from FNAF 1 before the title screen, and there's one in this movie too. However, for what happens, you gotta wait till the spoiler section, but I will say it is absolutely incredible, and honestly, I could make an entire video dedicated to just that one scene. It's just so unbelievably good. But onto the actual rest of the movie. For starters, the actual plot of the movie is pretty interesting, and I think it tackles some really interesting themes. They showcase a lot of in-depth and interesting ideas, and some of those ideas are explored incredibly well, and some of the chemistry between the characters are incredible. The animatronics, the Jim Henson Creature Shop, did an absolutely phenomenal job on the animatronics. They all look absolutely incredible, and they were just an absolute blast to see on the big screen. They really stepped it up from the first movie. The music in this movie is really good. They bring back that Newton Brothers songs that we know, but make it into a way that's unique for this movie, and it fits so well. And there's a lot of things they did with the music that was just so awesome. I absolutely love the soundtrack of this movie. The set design is also absolutely incredible, with some of the most stunning locations I've seen. And the animatronics themselves also move around much better than they did in the first movie, which is really impressive. One thing I will mention is the voice acting for the toys, since that was something that everyone was quite interested to see. Everyone, in my opinion, did an amazing job, and in terms of acting, all the human characters did a good job too. However, there was one actor who didn't do as good as a job as I would have liked, but more on that later. That's a spoiler thing. Back onto the voice acting, a common complaint that I've heard from friends of mine is that the voice acting is a bit monotone and boring and more robotic with barely any emotion. But I actually think this is incredible, since they really sell the animatronic vibe. Plus, I think it's pretty well established that the toys aren't possessed like the original OG FNAF 1 crew are. But more on that point in the spoiler review, although don't say that the toys being not possessed is a spoiler. Calm the fuck on. Now, one aspect that I was very surprised at was the horror and atmosphere of the movie, and compared to the last movie, they did an absolutely exceptional job. This movie is a lot scarier, has more tense moments, and you feel tense throughout the entire movie. I will say the supernatural element is here quite a bit, and it really helps set the mood of the film. Although I wish there was more horror focus with the backstory with Vanessa, since the realistic moments of William are probably the most terrifying parts of any of these movies. But still, the horror was good, the atmosphere was incredible, and just a warning, there are a lot of jump scares. And while I think some of them actually suck, a lot of them work really well. Besides that, the character development is really good, and I got a lot more invested into the actual story compared to the previous one. However, one of the initial things about this movie that was extremely noticeable upon watching it was the pacing and how unbelievably frantic it is jumping from one scene to the next, which, while allows the movie to show a lot of really cool moments, the trailers highlighted a lot of the stuff that was going on, like Mike playing the FNAF 2 game and so much more. We don't get as much time for things that might have been more interesting to explore a bit more. Mainly talking about the relationships between William and Vanessa, as I think they are absolutely incredible, and it's one of the best interactions in the whole movie, even though it's in dream form. A lot of character dynamics are really good and carry the movie quite a bit. However, there is one that I have a massive problem with, but that's for the spoiler section. But two of the main characters have really bad chemistry, and actually there are two characters that deserve way more screen time than they actually got, and actually deserve way more time together. One character that was a pleasant surprise to see in this movie, which was also unsurprising, is the puppet. And again, they're obviously in the movie trailer, don't hit me with that stuff. And the way they do them in the movie is different to the games, but I don't actually hate it. I feel like the story and the plot does stray a lot from the original, and die-hard FNAF fans may find that a bit jarring, although the plot does suffer from, again, not being that understandable to the average viewer, and a lot of plot points just happen to be convenient at times, which I know is fine for the movie, and honestly it's not a huge contention, but at the same time it's kind of annoying when watching the movie. I was turning to my girlfriend and she was turning to me, and we're just being like, that's convenient, whenever a certain thing happened in the movie. I counted like 10 times that this happened, by the way, which is something I think the average viewer might be jarred by as well. Some of the decisions the movie makes with the character dynamics and the plot are really bizarre, and I feel like the first half of the movie is way better than the second half, as the first half introduces all these really cool ideas, but then the second half only focuses on one singular aspect of the plot and kind of ignores the rest of the plot, which leads me to my point of the movie being a bit too short and missing a lot of plot points, which we could have explored a bit more and should have been explored more. The main one being the dynamic between Vanessa and William, which after the halfway point in the movie, it just drops out when there really could have been more going on. Another one I would love to see more is the inclusion of Henry Emily, which is good, and he is really good when he's in the movie, but he's only in the movie for like a minute and then he's just gone, which is really unfortunate. The movie suffers from massive pacing issues and focuses in my opinion, on the worst aspects of the movie to be focused on. But I think the movie is still an absolute joy to watch, and as a FNAF fan, you will definitely enjoy it. There's a lot of really cool Easter eggs, and the plot is still really entertaining. But the movie is very fast paced and honestly has a really weird and bad ending in my opinion. Or at least it is executed badly. I don't think the ending itself was actually bad and it's really cool. I mean, the movie is just setting itself up for FNAF 3, but you know, we'll get into that in a minute. I think this movie could have just been a little bit longer. It could have explored more that it had failed to explore due to runtime. Like, there's just so many plots. But to explore those plots, we're gonna have to get into some of the spoilers. So this is your warning. We will be going over spoilers in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, let's go. Alright, so now we are in spoiler territory. I'm giving you a second warning because I'm nice. I can talk about the specifics, and I'm going to be going through basically the entire movie and talk about what I did and didn't like about the movie, what went well and what didn't work. And let me tell you, there's a lot that I want to talk about. You can see by the length of this video. For starters, as I said before, the beginning 5 minutes of this movie is amazing. Actually, the single best scene from both movies, and honestly, maybe just in general. It was an absolute blast to watch. This scene is basically how Charlie died, and I think the way it was done was absolutely incredible. Plus, the opening with William announcing the animatronics with the logos at the start was fucking awesome. The beginning showcases how Charlie is waiting for an animatronic to come up from the trapdoor and out at the front of the stage, and it's a lot of mystery for we don't really know who this character actually is. We then see Charlie watch a child getting lured into the back room by William in the yellow rabbit suit, and seeing the way it was done, you can really see how clever William actually was, and of course, this was before he ever actually killed anyone, so maybe it shows a lack of care and a lack of planning, but it also shows the complete incompetence as the parents, as Charlie runs around trying to get help but no one's willing to help her. She then decides to go help the child herself, crawling into the back room where William is shown to be washing something while whistling. I'm assuming a knife or something. And Charlie is crawling around trying to avoid his attention, and this is honestly terrifying. But then after a while, she manages to get to the child and pick him up to run back, but William is behind her, and we see this horrific shot where Charlie is trying to get to the door before William can catch her, and then we see this blurry shot from Charlie's eyes as she stumbles onto the show stage, and she screams before dropping down, revealing she was stabbed in the back by William. At that moment, the trapdoor opens and Charlie falls in, before she is brought back up in the arms of the puppet. Everybody stares in absolute shock, and then the intro card plays. I will be completely honest, this is absolutely beautiful, and is an absolutely amazing beginning for the movie. Honestly, I just can't get over how perfect and well constructed this scene is. From the camera angles, to the music, to the costume design, to the acting, it was all done so well. And I have to applaud absolutely everybody for making this scene so incredible. And big props to Matthew Lillard, who does an absolutely incredible job acting in this movie. And honestly, these Yellow Rabbit moments at the beginning, that was the scariest part of this whole movie, and I wish that they kind of showed a bit more of this. But I'm going to use this to transfer to another incredible scene, which is Vanessa's nightmare, which has a massive amount of spoilers, Jesus Christ. Vanessa throughout the movie has flashbacks and PTSD moments where she sees William grabbing her, jumping at her, in the mirror behind her, etc. And these moments are truly scary and quite impactful. And once we get to the actual dream itself, which is a suggestion by Mike on the date, of course, which is one aspect of the original movie I couldn't really get behind, but it's whatever, because unlike the first movie, there's only one dream sequence. Although I will say the problem wasn't the amount of dream sequences, it was the fact that we spent more time there than the actual fucking location that the movie was based off, and that it was quite literally the exact same dream just over and over and over again, just dragging information. But anyway, in this movie, I think they cover the dream stuff really well. But I almost wish there was more of it. The Vanessa dealing with her trauma from William is an unsolved plot point that could be expanded upon more, and I just love the chemistry that these two have as well. But back to the dream, we see that Vanessa's fear of William on full display. This is a moment of showing, not telling, the horrors that she dealt with. And while she's hiding from William, we get to see Circus Baby. And yes, Circus Baby is in this movie. And this whole sequence is again just really cool. Vanessa and William have amazing chemistry, and another character that I really enjoyed actually was Charlie. They did an absolutely fantastic job of Charlie, and honestly the only thing I wish I had done a bit more was explore Vanessa's childhood with her talking to Charlie as a bit more as well, since that's something that they talk about and then they just never address again. Like, they could have had a whole bit of extra time to dedicate to that, but I'll talk more about that later on. I think that the horror and the actual gore in this movie was done way better than in the first movie. There's actually visible blood, you can see the animatronics actually kill people, and while it's obviously not super graphic, it's PG-13, it's now implied a lot more now to say that the animatronics feel more like an actual threat and a lot scarier. Plus, the puppet is horrifying. Although I do have mixed opinions on the puppet being morphed with the actual human actors that they are possessing. While on the one hand it is very creepy, and it does remind me a lot of Pennywise from the It movies, and from a budget standpoint I do understand why they did that, but part of me really wanted to see the actual puppet, which is a bit of a shame because that puppet was absolutely incredible and probably my favourite animatronic in the entire movie. But it still worked for what it was. I wasn't super upset about it. Also, a slight nitpick, I felt the movie missed a pretty huge opportunity with Charlie. The plot makes sense, and it's actually pretty good, with Charlie being trapped in her rage and wanting to take revenge for those who, actually wronged her, which makes sense to the game lore, although I wish it was the same as the original cast as well, but whatever. And her motives make sense and were effective, but I feel like there could have been something to do more with her helpful and selfish nature, since the movie literally opens with her helping another child. There could have been one or two scenes where she really explores that, And no, I don't mean Toy Chica helping out Abby at the science fair. Plus, we all know the real reason Toy Chica was on screen for 85% of the toys' appearances. It's because Megan Fox was expensive and they had to milk her for all she was. Not because people wanted to see Toy Chica, you sick Anyways, a few more points. Michael Afton is in this movie, which I guess isn't a spoiler, but whatever. And he is actually one of the bad guys, which is very interesting. Acting the opposite to Vanessa's character, where she's trying to escape William's past and not end up like William, while Michael Afton is the complete opposite, where he is trying to establish the legacy of killing children. I know, it's really cool. And all that, which I think is a really interesting and new dynamic. And one thing that I do like about the movies, it's exploring the FNAF universe in a way that we have never seen before, and I think it's really awesome, as it's able to do this without actually impacting the real story. I do wish that there was some more actual dynamic and exploration of Michael Afton's character, which I have the same opinion on for Henry Emily, who was also in this movie, and it feels like they should have had way more screen time than they actually got. But they set up their roles perfectly, and obviously this movie is setting up for the third, and probably final FNAF movie, and they're probably going to be in that movie. And this leads us to the end credit scene, which shows the teenagers, which look like they're about to be running Fazbear Frights, finding and deciding to take back Springtrap. And we get our first look of Springtrap, and I will say, he looks absolutely awesome, incredible, and honestly, I have to give massive props to the costume designers. All the animatronics in this movie look absolutely spectacular and utterly amazing, and they all fit really, really well in universe. Also, I want to just say too, this Springtrap skin, Dead by Daylight, come on guys, get on that. There's also some cool details as to how the withered animatronics are actually prototypes that ended up being used for parts rather than a variation of the original crew. Speaking of which, they are here too. Admittedly, this bit is a tiny bit cheesy, but it still works. At the end of the movie, Mike, Vanessa, and Abby are cornered after the puppet escaped from Abby because she possessed her. Yes, this movie has a lot happen and it's hard to explain everything because Jesus Christ, there's so much that happens in this movie. I'll get into why that's a problem in a little bit. And Michael Afton and all the toys are here to kill them after Michael's just revealed himself as the bad guy and all this sort of stuff, but whatever. But then, as the toys are about to kill him, the FNAF 1 crew come back and kill the toys in one epic final battle, which admittedly they win with zero effort, but whatever, it's a cool moment. And then they all immediately die because of the power thing, since all the... Anyway, basically all the animatronics have a perimeter control function and that causes them to not be able to leave. And the toys were able to do that because they tricked Abby into freeing them. But anyways, the original crew die and it's revealed that the children's souls were keeping William's soul from escaping. And now they have to move on and they say that he will come back. And I do like this moment. Maybe not the scene after it, but whatever. I will give massive props to the set design as the FNAF 2 location is actually super well done and it's actually a really awesome location to be in. And also, the FNAF 2 office, it's super faithful to the original game and it's super awesome. It was absolutely incredible to see the animatronics come after him and actually have a scene that was faithful to the games. Although it did make the gameplay seem a lot easier compared to FNAF 2's gameplay loop. Like, these guys stare at Mike for like 5 seconds and all of a sudden they're like, oh, actually, never mind. This isn't Michael Afton. This isn't even Mike Schmidt. This is that animatronic. This is just Freddy. Anyway, I also love how Mike gets snuck up on by these loud-ass animatronics, which is admittedly a bit of a problem. The fact that they're so loud, but they're also like meant to be sneaky. Like, why are you surprised? Like, oh my god, I didn't see you there. I couldn't hear you coming. Like, dude. They're loud. They're really loud. But this leads to my first real complaint about this movie, which I will get into now, and begin talking about the negatives for this movie. To start, my first problem with this movie, and that has to be Mike Schmidt and his constant shift to whether we trust Vanessa, or is just a normal smart person. Mike acts like a fucking idiot in certain parts of this movie, and no disrespect to Josh Hutcherson, because I know he's a good actor, but he was not very good in this movie. A lot of his reactions were very monotone, and it almost feels like they had to reuse shots, or they just didn't direct him the best, which might have been the case of why he wasn't very good. But like, Mike at the start of the movie is talking to Vanessa and seems to be wanting to help her out with some issues that she has, and tries to get Vanessa to open up to him at the dinner/date scene, which everyone jokes about, implying that Mike is trying to get Vanessa out of her shell, you know, like a good person. Then, the very next time they talk, Mike hits her with this, you need to move on from Freddy's even though I told you to move on from Freddy's and like go back and deal with your past and all this sort of stuff, and I want to move on with Abby and all this because she's just a kid kind of deal. It comes out of nowhere, and it feels like Mike is just being a fucking asshole, which Vanessa rightfully tells him off for. But then later on, when Mike rescues Vanessa from Charlie, Vanessa's like, you need to trust me, and they're working together, and yeah. And anyway, the fact that Vanessa apparently hasn't told Mike anything, but we don't know how long it's been, and that Mike hasn't been super open to listen to, it just feels weird, man. Then at the end of the movie, when Mike Afton shows up and he's like, choose me or them, and she chooses them, right afterwards, Mike says, stay away from us, and all this stuff, which obviously it's the ending of her getting possessed, and yada yada, the third movie will fix it. But the way Josh Hutcherson delivers these lines, and the lack of any actual scenes between them, makes you feel that Mike is just a big fucking idiot who can't make his mind up on whether he wants to solve the mystery, he wants to help Vanessa, Data, fucking who knows what's going on inside this monotone-ass brain. Which, again, the delivery in this movie sucks. Something I will definitely say is they really just had no faith in showing, not telling. It's like everything that they did, they had to like actually say what they were doing, like, oh, the animatronics are gonna come down in here and there's no doors and you need to put on the mask and I'm gonna go do this, and the animatronics were able to do this because of this. It was a lot. I'm sorry, I'm yapping, but I am very passionate about this movie, you can kind of tell. And speaking of the monotone delivery, Mike can't make his mind up if he's scared of an animatronic coming right for him or if he's bored at his office job. And let's talk about this scene really quickly, because this scene deserves its own talking section. When Vanessa is out and trying to track the animatronics with Mike's help, Mike is in the FNAF 2 office, and I actually really like this section. It's super cool with him being attacked, but like he goes from being nervous to literally just chill and slow as fuck with reactions, and you just don't feel that he's in any danger whatsoever, and it just kind of feels like he's chilling, which makes the winning moment feel completely unearned. I feel the direction and lack of development between him and Vanessa really makes this point drive home, and I don't necessarily blame Josh Hutcherson for his performance entirely, because at the end of the day, it's the director's job to decide if they did a good job or not, but you know, whatever it is. On to the acting. I already praised Matthew Lillard, who I think is the star of the show, since even though he's not in a lot of scenes in this movie, and canonically is dead, the ones that he is actually in, he does an incredible job in. And in my opinion, he did a much better job than he even did in the first movie, and you really got to see just how absolutely terrifying he was. Again, even if the scenes where he doesn't talk, I mean, he's absolutely terrifying in the Yellow Rabbit suit. God, that beginning scene, I will never stop talking about that beginning scene. Piper Rubio as Abby does a surprisingly good job at her role, and I think that she was the standout actor besides, you know, of course, the others, and of course, Elizabeth Lai, who I think did a much better job as being a troubled but assertive character who was dealing with her trauma, much like the first movie. Again, most of the issues I have with these actors, and even Josh, is the actual script itself and the direction. But overall, it's really not that bad. Now, the animatronic voice acting was actually hilarious and really well done, and by hilarious, I mean Matt Pat as Toy Bonnie. He doesn't use his actual voice, so it's funny because you don't actually know it's him if you didn't know it was him. Like, seriously, you would not be able to tell that it's him from just listening. But the voice still fits surprisingly well, and Toy Freddy as Kellen Goff is incredible, but I wish he had more lines. Megan Fox as Toy Chica was actually really good. I will not lie though, I wish that Toy Freddy was the main one. Kellen Goff was definitely the best of the three, but whatever. Actually, two really interesting roles were Skeet Ulrich as Henry Emily and Freddie Carter as Michael Afton, who, I will say, both did a pretty good job, all things considered. Henry's role was pretty good, and Ulrich did a great job portraying the sadness and regret. Although it's a shame he was only in the movie for like 60 seconds, he was really underutilized. And Freddie as Michael did a surprisingly good job as well, and admittedly had more screen time to actually show it off. He's got the same spark that Matthew had in the first movie, although it's not nearly as impressive or impactful, and I feel like he didn't get enough time to truly shine into his role. But again, that's an opinion on the acting, although I'm not done with Michael because it leads to more criticism. I think that Michael Afton and Henry Emily in this movie showed a big problem that this movie has from an actual story standpoint, and that is that this movie refuses to actually stick to one singular thing for more than like 60 seconds. For instance, we see Mike and Henry talk, he says the most generic things, I should have been there and I'm a bad dad and people were celebrating it and I want to stop them so I put the flyers up and all this stuff. And then the next scene, and we just never see Henry again, like ever. Same with Vanessa's stuff, same with the Michael stuff. We spent more time on the plot line of Abby's teacher being an asshole than the actual plot itself, and I am completely serious. We spent like 10 minutes talking about Abby builds robots, but the teacher doesn't want her to participate because he's a dick. And then when Abby does show up with the robot that she got built with Chica, he drops the robot in front of everyone because he doesn't want Abby to sabotage the competition, which I will say they would have won. And also, least likable character in the movie, which I guess is what they were going for, but this was a cheesy way to do it in my opinion. Like, he's just way too much of a dick. And while it was funny when he died, it kills the horror since the whole idea is that the toys or Charlie who's controlling them or whatever is actually wanting to kill people who are innocent, and they choose to kill people who are actually mean in the start of the movie. So I don't know how I feel about this. Also, I won't lie, there was a really funny moment in the cinema. There's like a scene where Chica's like, I'm gonna see what's inside the professor's head, and then he crushes his skull. He's like, there's nothing in there at all, and then some teenager in the front row just yells, "Chicken jockey," and the whole audience starts laughing. That honestly made the movie way more entertaining. But anyways, when it comes down to the horror and comedy, I think my biggest problem isn't actually the horror itself or the comedy itself, because like I said, it's really good. Although the puppet filter does look a bit weird and overlines of jump scares can get a bit tiring, it's that the movie can't decide whether it wants to take itself seriously or not and be a horror comedy movie. It's not a huge point, and honestly, it's not even that big of a noticeable difference, but it's a small point that I feel I have to make. But now, onto the biggest gripe that I have. The pacing and the movie length. This movie just jumps from scene to scene, and it has so much interesting stuff that it wants to talk about and show, but it jumps from one scene to basically the next one, which neglects the entire interesting stuff that we just saw in favor of fast action, faster back and forths, with more stuff happening, and it ends up neglecting so much of the plot that you kind of just wish that the movie was longer. The movie runtime is, in my opinion, the biggest killer of this movie. Like I said before, the movie ends up at a length of 1 hour and 44 minutes, which I think is absolutely crazy, since it's shorter than the FNAF movie. I know that 1 hour and 40 minutes isn't the worst length of all time, and it's a decent time all things considered, but I feel like these movies could benefit from just an extra 20 to 30 minutes to really flesh out the important stuff, which I think is also the case for the first movie. Again, the first movie was a lot slower and had a lot more scenes of talking and didn't show Freddy's all that much, while this one felt like it went in the complete opposite direction, with something happening every 15 seconds. Granted, all of those things, especially at the beginning of the movie, were really cool. I feel like this movie would have benefited way more from focusing on the Vanessa/William dynamic, or even better, Vanessa and Charlie, and also having the movie be longer to explore everything. I also think that they rushed the Mike plot with Vanessa, and it feels like Vanessa just doesn't have any time to tell him anything. And you know what's funny? This leads to the end of the movie, which in my opinion is the worst part of the entire movie. The movie ends with Michael showing up and, I explained what happened before, yada 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 yada, the toys and everything like that, and anyway, Michael apparently is defeated and escape after Mike does the whole "stay away from us" card because he didn't tell him everything, and, them putting in danger and stuff, which is ridiculous because for one, it's fucking Abby being the curious child that causes everything to happen, and because Mike wouldn't listen to Vanessa from the start, and two, because she just fucking stood by your side instead of going to her psychotic brother, which leads to Vanessa being alone as Charlie possesses her, and that's how the movie ends. The ending is very abrupt, and honestly, it's kind of lame. I get that they were trying to set up the third movie, but this just doesn't feel earned. Plus, there's a really easy fix. Make the movie a tad longer so the movie can begin with Vanessa waking up in the hospital like she was in the last movie, and Mike can be there and be like, "You need to tell me everything," and then Vanessa's like, "Yes, I will," and then throughout the movie it's obvious she's hiding stuff from him the entire time, which would make Mike's actions a lot more justifiable, but instead they just jump the gun and it's dumb. Anyways, there's also the fact that they skip over Abby a bit after focusing on her so much. She is at the science fair, and then 30 minutes later she's being put to bed by Chica, which is what? And then the possession stuff, and again the Charlie and Vanessa dynamic is so much more interesting. Oh god, this movie just had so much potential and falls flat on these basic levels. The last thing I want to talk about are the Easter eggs and the cameos. Corey Kenshin is back as the taxi driver. Whatever, cool I guess. Doug makes an appearance, and although I really love Doug and the absolute icon he is, his endgame ass comment of "looks like you're going to need a lawyer" just felt like cinema bait, and you know what? Yes, It absolutely worked. Everyone in the cinema was cheering at that moment. It was absolutely beautiful. Shadow Bonnie makes a second appearance, and when I mean second, I mean like a 1 second appearance, when Mike is in the office defending himself, and admittedly, that was really awesome. It was definitely a blink and you'll miss it moment, but it was really cool, and I was very excited. And of course, can't forget the Freddy plushie, which makes the Freddy beatbox sound, which was absolutely hilarious. Definitely the highlight of the movie. Well, not the highlight, but whatever. And apparently Torka and Rosbowski were in the movie, but I actually just didn't see them unless I'm dumb and I'm being my leg pulled. And apparently there was an end credit scene with Henry and I didn't see it, so, you know, it is what it is, but whatever. I think all the Easter eggs were good, they didn't detract from the story all that much, and it was fun additions, all things considered. No Matt Pat cameo worthy, but it was still awesome. But now, let's go over my final thoughts. So overall, I think this movie did a lot right and did a lot wrong. Is the movie good? Overall, I think so. I mean, I already talked a lot negatively, but I don't think this movie is the best thing ever made, but I really think they upped the production and the quality of the story in a really clever and innovative way, and adapted the story in a very unique way that I'm very excited to see the rest of the story unfold. I just hope the next movie is a bit longer and actually focuses on the good stuff. Or, you know, it's just a bit longer. Come on, 1 hour and 40 minutes is not enough time. This movie had huge potential, and honestly, it reminded me a lot of the original FNAF 2 game in that regard, since I've been like going back and looking at it because, you know, that's something I did while gag. It's all flash with huge potential, but not much to actually show when you look down at it. But with that, what do I rate this movie? I would have to give it... it's difficult. For the first 5 minutes of the movie, 11 out of 10. Like, that beginning scene was just fucking perfect. Like, better than perfect. It was beautiful. I love it. I literally want to make an entire dedicated video to that. But for the first half of the movie, I'll give it an 8 out of 10. It was really, really good, and it really fleshed out the characters in cool ways, and there was a lot of cool plot points that were going to be explored. And for the second half of the movie, maybe a solid 5.5 or 6 out of 10. Which, you know, that's because they didn't really follow up on everything they said they were going to follow up on, you know, kind of set things up and then don't explore it, which means I have to average it out at about a solid 7 out of 10, with it ranging from 6 to 8 depending on the mood and what part of the movie I'm up to. But with that, that was my Five Nights at Freddy's 2 movie review. If you enjoyed this video and you want to see more review videos, please let me know in the comments below. But with that, thank you so much for watching, be sure to check out my other videos, thank you to all my channel members, subscribe, I'll see you next time.